Hello everybody, we just went ahead and complete the longest fucking title known to man, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Such a long title. But essentially this is a remaster, I suppose you could say. I don't really understand the difference between a remake and a remaster, to level with you guys. I'm pretty sure a remake means that they are changing shit and entirely recreating the title. And if that's the case, then this is a remaster because the graphics are much better for the gameplay, at least. But the story is the same. So I'm not going to get into any spoilers here, even though this is like technically a super old game. Let's get into the pros, the cons, and then I'll give you guys my final rating. So I'm playing this on PC, and as of right now, there's a plethora of issues with the PC version. Number one being, and I'm recording this on the 18th, so I believe this game came out on the 13th. So it's been 5 days, and they have still not updated this, but controllers are just not working a lot of the time. A lot of people, it doesn't matter if you're using Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, controllers are not working. So I had to play the entire game with mouse and keyboard, which was a little bit frustrating because the mouse and keyboard support is not good for the game. It's definitely made for controller. So just to preface that, at the very beginning, be careful if you're playing on PC because there's a lot of issues with it right now. The game runs fantastic, don't get me wrong. It runs fantastic, much better than Final Fantasy VII Remake, which had tons and tons of stutter due to shader compilation. But be wary if you want to play on controller. Maybe wait for a patch. But anyway, let's get into the pros. The first pro I would say is that the graphics when you're actually in the game are great. They're really, really good. Obviously, light years better than the original PSP graphics. They're not quite to the level of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is weird. You would think that they would just use the same assets and it would be all the same engine, but it's not. It looks a little bit worse. So if you consider Final Fantasy VII Remake to be a 10 out of 10 for graphics, it's probably sitting at like an 8 out of 10. But, like I said, it runs really, really well. I was at a constant 120 FPS throughout the entire game, not even a little bit of a drop. Just locked, 120, everything max. Of course, I have a 3080 Ti, so, you know, that's how a game should run in theory on that card, but it's actually really, really smooth. And you can play this on shitty GPUs as well and easily get 60 FPS. So it's optimized very, very well. And the graphics are still very good. Even though they're not to that level of Final Fantasy VII Remake, they're still really, really good. Another pro that I would say is that the summons are super dope. Same with the limit breakers. The limit breaks and the summons are just really, really cool. The little cutscenes that they play are fantastic. Like, the summons go hard in this game. Probably not to the level of, like, Final Fantasy 16 when that comes out, because those summons look like they're going pretty damn hard, but they go hard in this game. Super cool looking. Sound design, I think in terms of the soundtrack, it's phenomenal. You know, Final Fantasy games always have banger soundtracks, and this game is no different. Really, really solid soundtrack. A lot of the returning songs that you know, the Sephiroth, bum 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 Sephiroth. That song, fucking banger, dude. I could listen to that on repeat for 10 hours straight. It's in here. All of the songs that you know from like Final Fantasy VII that you're hoping that are gonna be in are in spades, and they sound great. And that's about it for the pros. I'm not gonna lie, man. This game's a little bit rough. And let's get into the cons and I can tell you why. This is the first game I've played where it's a remake of something and you can really, really feel that they just straight up one-to-one this shit with the PSP version. Especially in the level design. The level design is so incredibly linear. A lot of the times when you're fighting enemies, because it has random encounters, and random encounters are just terrible. They've never been good in any game, ever, and they're still not good, 30 years later, after we learn that they're bad, they're still bad. They still suck ass. I hate them. I've always hated them. And so there'll be a random encounter, and the area that you're fighting in is so small, and sometimes there'll be 3 or 4 enemies, and you get chunked in this game. Like, if you get hit, you get fucking chunked. You can die in the blink of an eye if you get hit with like 3 or 4 characters. And there's only 2 difficulties, normal and hard. And holy hell, I mean, some attacks are killing you even if you're blocking. They're shitting on you. And I felt that the combat in general in this game was just not fun, because it comes down to this. It comes down to, if it's a slow enemy, you attack, or use your spell, or use your skill, and then dodge, and then you just kite around them. You're just kind of circling around them because their attacks are slow and they're never ever going to hit you. And it's just whittling down this huge health bar, right? Super duper boring. And then if it's a fast enemy, it just comes down to attack, block. Attack, block. Attack, block. Potion, because you're still taking a shit ton of damage, even when you're blocking. Attack, block. Spell, block. And then it'll really just come down to, in the end game, or even mid game, when you just buy a bunch of potions, and you buy a bunch of, I think they're called ether, that restore your magic, you're just spamming spells. Like, you're just running away from dudes and spamming spells on them, and then using ethers and spamming spells, because the potions are really cheap and they give you so much mana and so much health. So that's all you're doing. You're just spamming spells, basically. And I know you might be like, well, Zach, you can actually play this way and blah, blah, blah. Listen, the most efficient way to play the game is just boring. It's just spamming spells. That's it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Final Fantasy VII Remake, they have a perfect system in place. You have to use your main attacks in Final Fantasy VII Remake in order to build up, I think it's called your ATB gauge, and that will allow you to then use an ability. And your abilities, you have to be very decisive with them, because you have to acquire them through your normal attacks. So there's a lot of tactics there, right? You can't just spam spells like you can in this game. You have to attack enemies to build that bar up, and then you can use a spell. Then you have to decide what spell for what enemy, right? There's a lot of tactics there, and your attacks are very meaningful. Like, not your basic attacks, because they deal almost no damage, but your actual abilities are really meaningful. They're doing things like staggering. They're doing things like exploiting weaknesses and stunning, right? Allowing you to then combo into more and more attacks. In this game, your basic attacks deal quite a bit of damage, so you can just play it as a hack and slash, which completely removes the tactics. Or, like I said, you can just spam spells, which is by far the most efficient thing, especially against enemies that have weaknesses. Weak to fire, just spam a fire spell over and over and over, keep kiting them back and spamming a fire spell. And they have this mechanic in place where the more attacks you do in your basic combo, if you then cancel into a like a sword art or whatever they're called, like a skill with your sword, it'll do more damage, right? The problem with that is that almost no enemy in the entire fucking game will give you any bit of leeway to do 4 attacks and then do a skill. Because the moment you start attacking these dudes, they're going to poise right through, and then they're going to hit you, and they're going to do 600, 800 damage, and you'll have 1200 health or whatever. By the end of the game, I just had a full health build, plus 40% to my health, plus like 60 to my vitality, slotted in a bunch of materia to increase my HP, and then I was just literally spamming abilities and just decimating everybody. So I just don't think the combat is done very well in this game. I think it's sort of brain dead, and it can easily be remedied. Here's how I would change it. Add a parry. There's right out the gate, there's the second stance and the parry attack in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that allows you to get in there, attack a bit, and then if they're about to catch you mid-combo, you activate the parry. There's a lot of skill involved in that, right? You still take a bit of damage when you parry, but it's reduced by quite a lot, and you're getting damage out. In this game, it's like, oh, you got caught in the middle of an attack. Boom, you're hit. that's 1200, 1300 damage. Sometimes a fucking one shot, even with the full HP build. Like, dudes would hit me, and it would be like 2000 damage in a second. And then if there's another enemy about to hit you, you're dead. There is a dodge, but the dodge just isn't very good. And especially combined with the fact that a lot of the encounter areas are really small, there's not a lot of room to dodge. So you're much better off. It's much safer bet to just block, because that's going to reduce the damage by a lot, and then you just heal it through it, because you can buy a bajillion potions, you know, or a bajillion ether, and then use healing spells. So overall, not a big fan of the combat. I think it's not done well. Plus, they recycle enemies so much in this game. Like, you can feel that it was a PSP game from the days of old, because they recycle the same fucking enemies throughout the entire game. And then right at the end, there was actually quite a bit of unique enemies, and I was excited. I'm like, what the fuck is this little Russian doll enemy, you know? It was cool. It was exciting. I don't know why they didn't just have some of those enemies earlier in the game, because it's not until like the last level of the game I started seeing some actual enemy variety. So all in all, I just don't think the combat is a pro at all, and I didn't really enjoy it. And I actually found myself towards the end of the game, if it was enemies I didn't like, especially flying enemies. Flying enemies are fucking AIDS in this, because you can't even jump up and attack like you could in, or you can. You have to put a materia to jump and attack, which is so stupid, man. Like, he has legs, and he's a soldier. Just jump and attack. It's really not that complicated. You don't need fucking materia for that. You know, you could do that in just normal Final Fantasy VII Remake. You can't do that, so you really just end up having to use spells against flying enemies. And a lot of the times, I would just run out of the encounter. I would just flee these encounters, because I was like, I'm not even wasting my time. Oh, by the way, the game took 10 hours. I should have said that at the beginning. The game took 10 hours and 10 minutes, so right around that 10-hour mark. Also, for the negative, a lot of the voice acting is terrible. Like, Zach's voice acting, it seems like people are pretty split. I'm on the side where I think it's fucking awful. Genuinely, some of the worst voice acting, both in writing and in delivery, I have heard from a video game ever. In all of them that I've played hundreds upon hundreds of games. Some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard. I'm sure Japanese is better, but obviously when you're streaming a game, you know, you don't want to be streaming in Japanese, because then you feel like you can't talk, because people have to read the subs and stuff. So, plain Japanese, maybe it's better. I'm sure it is, but English is just garbage. Genuine garbage. The worst I've heard in so long. It's crazy. There's a couple characters that are good. Obviously, Sephiroth is fantastically voice acted. Cissnei is quite good. Aerith is great. But, like, the main heavy hitters are really fucking bad, man. It's not even funny. Actually, it is funny. A lot of times, it is funny. And some of the lines are just so cringeworthy. I swear it's somebody that is straight out of high school writing. Like, it is really bad. And speaking of bad writing, the story. Maybe I'm dumb, man. I don't know. I've played a lot of games. I understand almost all of the stories, but I was with the story for a long time. And then I think it was about chapter 7 or so that I was like, okay, wait, what? What is going on? And just the pacing and the tone of the narrative is all over the place. It'll be something really sad, and then literally seconds later, it'll be like, oh, you're here now and you're having fun. It is so weird. And to talk about bad pacing, there's several sections that are just awful. There's a section where you have to chase down this kid, and I swear to God, that section lasted like 20 fucking minutes. And it was terrible. And there's a whole section in one level with this shitty sniping minigame that, since I had to use mouse and keyboard because the game is fundamentally fucked on PC as of now, where I cannot use a controller, Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, it had me like zooming in with the arrow keys on the keyboard and aiming with W, A, S, and D while it's shaking, and then like pressing F to shoot. It was fucking awful, man. The whole sniping minigame was just garbage, and I ended up just running past all of it, and then it would spawn enemies to try and punish you for not doing the shitty sniping minigame, and I would just flee the combat from those enemies too. It was bad, dude. It was really, really bad. I'm sure it plays better on controller, but holy hell, it was just dog awful, and really stood out as just like, okay, this is bad. And I don't even know why it was in the game. It was just bad. It added nothing. Even if it worked perfectly, right? It still adds nothing. I don't know. It's just a shitty, like, sniping mini game for a whole level. But yeah, the pacing's all over the place here. The emotions, when they want you to feel stuff, it falls flat because the voice acting is so horrendous. And they do this weird thing where they didn't, for some reason, decide to remaster the cutscenes. So you're looking at like 480p, if I'm being generous, cutscenes. Like the cutscenes look terrible, and then it gets to the gameplay and it looks fantastic. And I just have no idea why they didn't just go in and redo the cutscenes, because it is rough. So overall, the game, I don't know, man. I'm sure like the Final Fantasy diehards they've probably already bought the game. They're probably already playing the game. They're probably already done with the game and starting on their second playthrough. Like, if you're not a Final Fantasy diehard though, you're somebody like me that's like played 13 and you've played 15 and you've dabbled a little in 14 and you played through Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and you're thinking that like this game is going to be on the level of any of those, you're completely wrong. This is just straight up a port of a PSP game with some better graphics, but it feels, from a gameplay perspective, old as hell and extremely dated, and not in a good nostalgic way, in like a really poor level design, poor pacing of the narrative, poor voice acting type of way. And all in all, I found myself not really enjoying it and just wanting it to be over as soon as possible. For me, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 10, man. It's a $50 title that's 10 hours to complete. There's very little replay value. Luckily, you could skip cutscenes, so I guess you can replay, and there is a New Game Plus, so I guess you could do that, but I don't see why you would do that, to be honest. It's rough as hell. If you're on PC, definitely wait for a patch that adds some controller support, because the mouse and keyboard options are just terrible. It's awful navigating the menus on mouse and keyboard. It's rough. But it does run really well. So my final verdict for the game, 3.5 out of 10. If you don't know me, a 5 is an average game, 4 is below average, and 3 is not good. I think this is right in between not good and below average. Just a bit below average, if you will. I don't think it's worth it. I think this game would be fine if it was on a fucking PSP, man. And we were rating it on PSP levels, but when you're trying to compete with the big boys on PC or PlayStation 5 or whatever, this game just doesn't. It's not up to the cut. It's really not, and it's lacking in a lot of fundamental departments that Final Fantasy VII Remake excelled in. I love Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think that game has some pacing issues as well. There's a couple chapters that are really not good, like the sewer and the spooky train section and stuff. There's a couple sections in Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know, that aren't necessarily good, and they feel like they're just there to pad out the runtime. But overall, I really enjoy the game. I believe I gave that an 8 or an 8.5. I really, really like Final Fantasy VII Remake, but this is just not it, man. It's not it. It falters. It's the worst Final Fantasy that I've played personally. I just don't think it's very good, to be entirely honest. But yeah, let me know if you disagree, if you really like it, if you're a big fan. And if you do really like it, I would love to know, did you play the original? Because I feel like people that played the original will really like this, because, you know, there's a little bit of that nostalgia. There's also a little bit of that, oh, this is like shiny and new. It's cool to see something that I played, you know, that looked like shit now looks great. I'd love to hear your feedback if you are somebody that has played it before and now you're delving in again. But not for me. Probably not for you if you're not a big Final Fantasy dude and you're just thinking that this is going to be on the level of some of the more casual Final Fantasies like 7 Remake or like 15. Probably not for you. But yeah, that'll do it for me. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. See all of you in the next video. Stream. Bye bye.